So the Insomniac situation has really taken a turn for the worse. If you haven't been paying attention, especially in the past few hours, we pretty much got the biggest data leak of any video game thus far, even exceeding the one from last year regarding GTA 6. This is on a whole different scale. Essentially, every single current and future project over at Insomniac Games has been leaked online, and I'm not just talking about roadmap, but pretty much cutscenes, full plot, animations, gameplay, even financial situations and revenue splits with Sony and with Marvel, plus the contracts that they signed for the Marvel franchise. So truly heartbreaking to see this happening in real time. Of course, if you don't want to get spoiled or anything, I suggest staying off Twitter and Reddit for now, and especially the subs dedicated to this type of information. So how did this came to be? Well, essentially a week ago or so, on December 12th, Cyber Daily, an Australian news outlet, reported that the ransomware group called Riceta, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, already posted some limited data from their apparent data breach over at Insomniac Games. This soon proved to be completely true because Sony also confirmed that online, plus they also opened up their own investigation, and there was also a ransom to be paid of about $2 million in Bitcoin, as it usually happens with these kinds of things. But obviously that never got paid, and for good reason. Even if you do pay these hackers, you still don't have the guarantee that the data which is already in their hands won't eventually still be released online. So the obvious course of action here is to contact authorities, which is also what happened in the case of the GTA 6 leaker from last year, which eventually, well, at least one of them were caught and sentenced by the UK authorities. In any case, their release schedule is very interesting because it does confirm a few things that we kinda suspected for a while now, and mainly that Insomniac Games is turning into that Marvel studio of games. They pretty much released Spider-Man, they have Venom, they have Wolverine, there are some projects pertaining to the X-Men universe in there too. So obviously this is the way forward, and it's not just because Marvel is a massive franchise, but mostly because this is where most of their ROI in the past few years stands in. And I'm talking about return on investment. These are the games that produce the most amount of profit for the company up until now. Spider-Man 1 and 2, and of course Miles Morales. Compared to Ratchet & Clank, which was their previous big series, the recent Rift Apart did not even pull off a profit, which is kind of daunting if you think about it. This is one of my favorite franchises of all time. I grew up with Ratchet & Clank, so it breaks my heart to learn that Rift Apart did not, in fact, pull off a profit. Maybe the time in which it dropped wasn't the best. It was when PS5 just came out. There was a shortage of hardware out there, so people mainly forgot about it in the meantime because eventually the supply chain problems were fixed, but the game released years back, and in the meantime we had other distractions. So it doesn't mean that Ratchet & Clank isn't going to get another game. It will, but only after a few years after Spider-Man 3. So there's quite a bit of time to wait until then. Now, in the meantime, we do have these confirmed projects. Obviously, 2024 is not going to see much. Spider-Man 2 is still going to be the mainline game here that they will focus on, likely with updates. At some point, Spider-Man 2 had a proposed update, or at least standalone spin-off with multiplayer included. This is where that multiplayer rumor came into play. It's maybe still going to be in the plans. Maybe we will still see an update that includes Spider-Man 2 with multiplayer, but I wouldn't count on it. It does seem, however, that a significant portion of the team is still engaged into developing stuff for Marvel Spider-Man 2, so 2024 is likely going to look very interesting for the game. Past this and into 2025, we're looking at the Venom game. This actually is going to be the next launch in between Spider-Man 2 and the Wolverine game, which has a 2026, I believe, release date, unless something goes wrong and they delay it. But Venom is going to be the next game, and this is going to act like the same standalone as Miles was for Spider-Man 1. So this is going to be the version of that, but for Spider-Man 2. So 8 to 10 hours of story, playing with a whole new character, in this case Venom, a storyline, and pretty much open world stuff that you would expect in New York. So missions, events, bases, crimes, collectibles, and all of that, except that we're going to do it with Venom, which I'm all up for, baby. This looks really interesting. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything, but I will say this: a lot of the stuff that has been built up and teased at the end of certain story missions and side content in Spider-Man 2 is actually seemingly going to be built towards the Venom games. So that part with Cassidy getting the Carnage suit is obviously going to be built towards this Venom game instead of any DLC or Spider-Man 3. This also means no Miles Morales 2, and for good reason. I think that what Insomniac is aiming for right here is essentially exploring a character as a standalone to give them a bit more of that limelight. It happened with Miles Morales. They showed his background. There's no point in making another game about him since it's obviously mainline Spider-Man now and part of Spider-Man 3. And this just gives us a lot more opportunities to explore other characters. Maybe that's going to be the way they will approach Silk 2, or who knows. It doesn't seem that there's a Silk standalone game being planned, so maybe she's going to be explored in Spider-Man 3 at some point. Now, very interesting to note is that starting 2025, according to Insomniac's own forecast, we might get to see an Insomniac game releasing almost every year. So Venom, Wolverine, then Spider-Man 3, and then there's also a bunch of other projects in there with the Marvel Universe, plus Ratchet & Clank. So it looks like a very busy schedule. However, I'm 99.9% sure that some of it at the very least is going to suffer some delays just because of the way these things kind of work. Plus, all things considered, Insomniac still has a pretty small team for all of the projects that they are currently engaged into. So 600 employees and, well, developers sounds like a lot, but not when you have video games of this magnitude. However, I'm like 99.9% sure that this is not going to be the case, and at least one of these projects will suffer some kind of delays at some point. Now, this also brings us to the next important subject, and that is Spider-Man 3. And I believe that Insomniac Games might follow a very similar route with how Sony Santa Monica did with God of War Ragnarok. Now, for those who are unaware or did not know, the God of War series, after being rebooted on the PlayStation 4 and 5, was supposed to contain 3 parts. However, Sony Santa Monica decided that instead of releasing 3 parts, the last 2 would be grouped up and condensed into one single bigger release, which was God of War Ragnarok last year. And from the looks of it, it seems that Insomniac is finding itself now in the same situation. So according to one of its panels, at some point it was proposed that Spider-Man 3 to be released in 2 parts as a 2-part series, one coming up in holiday 2027 and another one in holiday 28. However, it might be that things will change until then, and they might decide on going with the same route that Sony Santa Monica did with God of War and just condense that into a much bigger game and kind of go out with a banger. God of War Ragnarok is one of my favorite games of all time. They absolutely nailed it. The story length was perfect, 50 hours right there. It was just insane how good it was. I just hoped the same were the case with Spider-Man 2. I found it to be rather short this time around. I think that 5 to 10 more hours of story would have definitely tied out some loose ends in there, give more shine towards certain characters and flesh them out a little bit more. And I think that they have the perfect opportunity to do so with Spider-Man 3. I don't think it's going to release in 2-part series, as it makes little sense for them at this point. In any case, that is about it with the major news so far. Of course, there are some other bits of info in there. There's actually a lot more than I covered. A lot of info about their future IPs, a lot of info and spoils about, well, the games in general, which I don't recommend seeing and taking a look at because you're just going to ruin a very fun experience for you. I have seen them and trust me, they are not worth it. But this is pretty much it with the video. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.